بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين يا خاتم النبيين يا شفيع المذنبين يا أنيس الغريبين يا رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وسلم. Last week, we sort of started shifting into talking about Imam Zayd and Imam Muhammad Baqir, and we'll talk about them today, inshallah, more specifically. Of course, these are two of the sons of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. He had more sons, but these are the two more famous sons. And as we said, certain points to remember, and I'm going to keep reiterating these points as we move forward. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Islam, you have like language, and you have like general definitions or meanings of terms. But then when Islam came, some of those terms or words that were used in one way, the Islamic definition became different, or it redefined it rather. Islam redefined certain things. And along with those definitions and meanings of words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also gave us practical examples. And so Ahlul Bayt are amongst those practical examples. And if we remember, or before I go into that, simple example of some difference of words. So Sawm in Arabic means to close. That's the general literary meaning of Sawm. To close anything. But when Islam came, Sawm means fasting. Okay, so the meaning of the word changed. Even though if you look at the root or the origins of the word, when we fast, we close ourselves off to eating and drinking and doing these other things. So again, the basis of the definition is still there, but Islam defines it very specifically. And there are many things that are related to this as well, and we can think of many examples. Simple example is like cleanliness. What is cleanliness? Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam have taught us cleanliness. That is half of our faith. But they didn't simply say, to be clean. They also defined what cleanliness is. And there are things that in certain cultures may be considered unclean, but Islamically we consider them clean. And also in other cultures they may be considered clean, but Islamically we consider them unclean. So we shouldn't be arrogant in making our own definitions. We should accept the definition of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we should submit to that. So that, instead of coming up with our own meanings of what this is or what that is. What Allah and His Messenger have told us, okay, this is it, then we submit to that. And once we submit, then we should not have any second thoughts. And simply like cleanliness, of course, we use water to clean ourselves after we use the bathroom. If there's no water, then you use dirt cloths, right? And you're clean. If there's no water, you make wudu with the dirt. And again, you're clean, you're pure. Even though, a lot of people think, look at the dirt, it's not clean. Well, Allah says it's clean. And not only is it clean, Allah says it also has the characteristics that He's given it to remove filth. So, we should always kind of focus on these things and remember or remind ourselves of these things. It's interesting. People have no problem drinking well water. Well, how did that well water get clean? By going through the earth. That earth, which we are thinking is unclean, Allah says no, it's clean, and not only is it clean, it purified the water, so that now we can drink it. So just kind of focus that. But as I was saying, He also gave us examples, right? So and this what I'm getting back to is the khutbah of Imam Zayn al-Abidin in Damascus, when he said that that Ahlul Bayt are distinguished with 6 characteristics. So these are the practical examples of those characteristics. The first one was knowledge. Right? So again, if we want to understand something, we have to go back to them. If we want to understand what something means, we have to go back to them. If we want to understand, how to do something and what are the limitations on things, we have to go back to them. Because they are the practical examples of knowledge. Forbearance, hidden, which includes sabr, or patience. That's forbearance encompasses that. Patience is part of that. Again, they are practical examples of what sabr means. Sabr isn't meaning being indifferent to things. It doesn't mean, not reacting to things. It means to react to things appropriately, with proportion, and not just how to react, but when to react and what to do. And when oppression comes upon you, how to be patient without complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and again, how to react. Because sometimes the reaction is, react with force. Sometimes the reaction is you react to the force by absorbing it. But again, they are the practical examples of that, and and as we talk more and more about them, we will see that more and more, inshallah. Generosity. And again, I'm not going to go into that very much, but again, they are the examples of that. Eloquence. Again, you listen to the khutbahs of Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, you listen to the khutbahs of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein al-Islam, within a few words, they encompass so much knowledge. And as I was saying, even poems written about them, like the poem that Farazdak said in honor of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, as I was saying, there are people today that have done their PhDs just on that one poem. Courage. And there's no greater courage, or example of courage than them. And again, I'm not going to expound on that right now. And then love in the hearts of the believers. So again, because they are that criterion of hypocrisy and belief. So the believer, the true believer, truly loves them, which also encompasses loving those that they loved, honoring those that they honored. Which is why those who curse the ones that they loved, even though they claim to love them and claim to be cursing them out of love for them, that's all a lie. So I'm going to talk about Imam Zayd first, and then we'll come to Imam Muhammad Baqir, even though Imam Muhammad Baqir is the older brother, by about 20 years. So significant difference in age. So Imam Zayd is born roughly around 77 Hijri. His father, of course, is Imam Zayn al-Abidin. His mother is Jayda al-Sindhi. So she was a prisoner of war when the Muslims went into Sindh. She was given to Imam Zayn al-Abidin as a gift, who freed her and married her. And from her is Imam Zayd. So he's born roughly about 77 Hijri, which is interesting because that's about the same time that Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah is also born. So the two of them are basically about the same age. Imam Ja'far Sadiq, who is the nephew of Imam Zayd, the son of Imam Muhammad Baqir, will be born about 6 years later, so about 83 Hijri. When Imam Zayd, when he's born, So you have to, and this is what I started talking about last week, and I'm going to reiterate this today. You know, you have to understand who the antagonists are at that moment. So this is why in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Musa alayhi salam, he also talks about Fir'aun. When he mentions Ibrahim alayhi salam, he also talks about Namrud. So that you not only see the right way, but you also see the wrong way. And you see the reaction of each to the other. So we see how Fir'aun reacts to Musa alayhi salam, but we also see how Musa alayhi salam reacts to Fir'aun. And we see that contrast. So that's why it's important to understand who the leaders of Banu Umayyah are during this time. And so, you know, of course, you know, Imam Hussein alayhi salam is martyred, you know, at the orders of Yazid. And then not long after that, Yazid himself dies. Okay, so 64 Hijri or so, Yazid dies. After which his son, Muawiyah is made king. I mean, Muawiyah the second is made king. And he is king, you know, really king for about 40 days. He abdicates the throne, and then after that there's a civil war within Banu Umayyah, after which Marwan bin Hakam, so basically 65 Hijri, Marwan bin Hakam becomes the king. So as we've talked about Marwan before, I'm not going to go into him today. You know, again, a very indecent, very manipulative, very evil man. And so Marwan, by the time he becomes king, is very old. He's in his 80s. Basically, within a year, he dies. So then his older son, Abdul Malik bin Marwan, becomes the king. And Abdul Malik has another brother, Abdul Aziz. And he's famous because he's the father of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Technically, he was supposed to have been king after Abdul Malik, but he died before Abdul Malik died. So the order of succession would have been Abdul Malik and then Abdul Aziz, but Abdul Aziz passes away before Abdul Malik dies. So after Abdul Malik, Walid becomes the king. So Abdul Malik was king for about 20 years. Walid becomes the king about 86 Hijri, somewhere around there, 86, 87 Hijri. And Walid is king for about 10 years. Walid is the one who has Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam Zayn al-Abidin poisoned. So this is one interesting point we'll note, and we've talked about this before, is that, you know, if you look at many of these Imams, pretty much all of them were martyred. Okay? Either open martyrdom, you know, through fighting and being killed, or secret martyrdom through being poisoned. So Imam Hassan al-Islam was secretly martyred through poisoning. Imam Hussein al-Islam is openly martyred through Karbala and fighting. Okay, so you're going to see this path through the rest of this lineage. The other thing here is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves someone, you know, when it's time to call them back, He grants to them that gift of martyrdom. You know, either the secret martyrdom or the open martyrdom, or obvious martyrdom. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin, which is, as we mentioned last time, is interesting, you know, because these are people, when you look at them, you know, you would think that they're not a threat to the establishment, because they're not, like, you know, when I talk about Imam Zayd al-Abidin, Imam Muhammad Baqir, Imam Jafar Sadiq, Imam Musa Qadim, all of these people, you know, Imam Zayd is the exception. We'll get to him, or on the other spectrum of that. All of these were not directly involved in politics, in the sense that they weren't leading open rebellions or calling for an open removal of the government. But the government feared them. because they were teaching the people true Islam, which in itself frees the people from the bondage and the shackles of the governments, from the bondage of the self, of the nafs. And so you can't fight someone who is not bound by something. His only bound, or his only shackles, are to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which frees him from all the other shackles. Kings, governments, presidents, prime ministers, tyrants, dictators, none of them like this, because it, basically removes the people from their subjugation. So this is why, even though from an apparent standpoint, looking at it from this perspective, you think, oh, well, they weren't a threat to the government. Well, the government knew who was a threat to them. And the government understood why these people are more of a threat than some other people. Because these are the people, again, who are guiding the people to the right path. Because if you think like when Rasulullah ﷺ came, why did Quraysh oppose him so violently? If everybody became Muslim, what was the threat to Quraysh's establishment? You would think, okay, he wasn't calling for, the removal of people or doing anything, against the government or the leadership. He wasn't calling for that. He was calling for justice. Again, if justice prevails, then these unjust people lose, and they understand that. And so this is why, even after, everything was said and done, and, from an apparent standpoint, Imam Zayd al-Abidin is not a threat to them, well, they still had him poisoned. So 95 Hijri is when Imam Zayd al-Abidin is poisoned. 96, the very next year is when Walid dies. Walid had him poisoned, Walid dies. Next year. So after Walid, Suleiman becomes the king, and his brother, Walid's brother. And Suleiman was king for only about 2.5 years. Suleiman, towards the end, initially he was pushing the agenda of his brother. And his brother was very much an oppressor. And this is why Umar bin Abdulaziz, while he was the governor in Medina, made the statement that you have Walid in Damascus, Hajjaj in Iraq, and Uthman in Egypt, and the whole world is covered with injustice. Uthman was one of their cousins. And so Walid, again, very much a tyrant. His brother becomes the king, who's continuing his initial policies, but then toward the end he has this epiphany that, oh, I'm about to die. I need to do something good. So he asked his advisors, is there any way that, is there any chance for him to be forgiven? Is there any way that he can make reprimands for all this stuff that he's perpetrated? And again, it wasn't like it was his own policies. He just simply continued the policies from before. So his advisors told him, yes, there is, and the only way for that is that you leave the affairs of the Muslims in someone who is decent. So Umar bin Abdulaziz is crucial to understand who he is at this point. Because Umar bin Abdulaziz, rahmatullahi alayhi, he is the cousin to all of these tyrants. But he is very different than he is very different than all the rest of the tyrants because of how he was raised. Plus, his lineage on his mother's side. So on his father's side, he's the son of Abdulaziz, who is the son of Marwan, this tyrant, evil man. On his mother's side, his mother is the daughter of the is the granddaughter of Umar radiallahu anhu. So his mother is the daughter of Asim bin Umar. His maternal grandmother, so it's important to know how Asim was married to his grandmother, or to his mother. His grandmother. So Asim is his grandfather. His grandmother, so what happens is during the Khilafah of Umar radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, at night he would leave his house, walk around the city, seeing if, what's going on, and he would be in disguise. No one knew who he was. Basically walking around. It's dark. You don't see much, and you see this guy walking around, so you don't suspect anything. He's got a hood on. No one can see his face too well, and so he would do this at night. And so at one time, a lot of people, we think of the Khilafah of Umar and we think of all this prosperity. There were extensive droughts and other issues going on during the Khilafah of Umar. At one point, there's a shortage of milk. And Umar gives the order that no one is to mix water with milk. Because, and people from other third world countries, Pakistan, India specifically, we know very well that, you're buying milk and you're probably getting, 3/4 water. All right. So he had ordered no one's to mix any water with the milk. And if you're selling milk, if you're selling milk, no one can mix anything. If you're selling milk, it has to be milk. Nothing adulterated. And so he's walking around one night and he hears this conversation. Houses were not well insulated. So you could walk on the outside, and if somebody's talking loud enough, you could hear them outside. And so he's walking by this house and he hears this conversation between a mother and a daughter. And the mother is waking the daughter up, saying, get up, go and make some water with the milk. And the daughter says that, the Khalifa has forbidden it. And the mother responds, well, the Khalifa is asleep. And the daughter says, well, the Khalifa may be asleep, but the Lord of the Khalifa is not asleep. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not asleep. So she refuses to mix the water with the milk. So Umar radiallahu anhu simply puts a mark on the door. He has his staff, he puts a little mark that you can know this is the place. And he leaves. The mark is not to come and arrest the old woman, the mother. The mark is put there, so the next morning he sends some men there and calls them into his court. And he exposes the conversation. And of course the mother, when she hears this, that the Khalifa knows, she's kind of, she's just terrified. Because now she's thinking, some punishment or something is to come. But at that moment is when he proposes, after finding out that the daughter is not married, proposes the marriage of the daughter to his son, Asim, who was not, who was looking for a wife. And so this is how that marriage took place. And so from that came this daughter, who is the mother of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Umar bin Abdul Aziz was not raised amongst Banu Umayyah. Because of the maternal connections, he's actually raised in the house of Abdullah ibn Umar. And so again, his nature is very different than the rest of the family. Also, when he was a young boy, his father sent him to study under Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah ibn Utbah ibn Masud. So this is the nephew of Abdullah ibn Masud. Abdullah ibn Masud, amongst the companions, is number 2 amongst the knowledge of fiqh. Ubaydullah is amongst the 7 fuqaha of Medina Munawwara. So very, very knowledgeable. And so his father, Abdul Aziz, sends Umar to go and study under him in the masjid, because he would give lessons in the masjid. So he went, and one day, the topic of Ali radiallahu anhu comes up. And of course, you have to remember, this is a time when it is a mandatory part of the khutbah to curse Ali radiallahu anhu. And so, in the conversation, Umar bin Abdul Aziz just mentions what he's heard, all the propaganda, and he presents it as though it's fact. And Ubaydullah, rahmatullahi alayhi, when he hears this, his response, and these are people who knew how to teach, who knew how to get their points across. He didn't go list by list going over, okay, you said this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. No. He simply asked Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he says, has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become upset or angry with the companions of Badr? Because everybody knew that the companions of Badr were amongst the greatest companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everybody knew that the companions of Badr were guaranteed paradise. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has looked from behind the curtain and has announced that doesn't matter what they do after this. Nothing they do after this can ruin anything of theirs. So this was general knowledge to everybody, including Banu Umayyah. And so that's all he asked. He says, has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala become upset or angry with the companions of Badr? And Umar bin Abdul Aziz's response to this is, was Ali in Badr? Was Ali was in Badr? Like this was news to him. Because the propaganda had been so deep that they had, basically tried to make people forget. This is what we're talking about Friday. This is one of the things that they do in order to remove you from knowledge, is to make you forget certain things. And so they tried to make people forget that Ali was in Badr. And this Ubaydullah, rahmatullahi alayhi, his response is, Ali was Badr. He was complete Badr. And this is where it gets into where, he had, of the 70 leaders of Quraysh that were killed, he killed 36 on his own and helped in another 13, leaving 21 for, the 312 other companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the 5,000 angels that had come down. So Umar bin Abdul Aziz, again, as I said, is very different. And so Sulaiman, he makes Umar bin Abdul Aziz his heir. So after me, he will be the king. And so this is how he's trying to make emancipations for all of the wrong that he had done. So Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullah becomes the king somewhere around 98, 99 Hijri. Of course, he removes the cursing of Ali from the khutbah. He gives fidq to Ahlul Bayt, back to Ahlul Bayt, because fidq, the thing was that the Banu Umayyah were taking these properties that were waqf for the ummah and using it as personal property. So when Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he sees this, to kind of safeguard these properties, he returned fidq to Ahlul Bayt. And he made sweeping changes throughout the empire. You have justice throughout the empire, to the extent that a wolf and a goat would come and drink from the same water hole, and the wolf wouldn't attack the goat. This is how deep the justice ran. And it's interesting, there's a story, incident where a man, is herding his sheep, and there's a wolf that comes and is drinking from the same water hole as the goats are. And as they're drinking calmly, then suddenly the wolf attacks one of the goats and kills the goats. And the man starts crying. And somebody asked him, and there's another person there, and he says to the other person, he said, I'm not crying because I lost my goat. I'm crying because the Khalifa, or the leader, or the king of the Muslims has passed away. Because it was because of him that this justice existed. And sure enough, exactly at that moment is when he had passed. But he didn't pass, as I said, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves somebody, He grants him the gift of martyrdom. And Umar bin Abdul Aziz is no different. So his cousins, realizing that, look, we're losing all of our wealth and power and all of this, so they're the ones who had him poisoned. And so about 101 Hijri, he passes, or is martyred through poisoning. And then Yazid II becomes the king. He's one of the sons of Abdul Malik. He becomes the king. He's king for about 4 years. And then after him, Hisham bin Abdul Malik becomes the king, who is king for about 20 years almost. So just remember this rough, time frame here. And if you forget, and while you're thinking about it, you can go back and look at the video or listen to the video. So, so now coming to Imam Zayd. So as I said, Imam Zayd is born about 77 Hijri, somewhere in there. And he is raised by his father, who, as I said, was martyred around 95 Hijri. So Imam Zayn al-Abidin raises him. And he's also taught by his brother, Imam Muhammad Baqir. One time Imam Muhammad Baqir asked him some questions about the Quran. And the response that he got, and this is when Imam Zayd is very young, Baqir means the one who opens. So he opened the doors of knowledge so extensively. This is why he's given this title of Baqir. And we will talk about him a little later on, but I want to talk about Imam Zayd first. So Imam Baqir, he asked him these questions about the Quran, and he responded in such a manner that Imam Baqir says that grace be upon your mother who gave birth to you, for you are a true replica of our forefathers. And he said about him as well that he was a perfect copy of Sayyidina Ali, karamallahu wajh, in his character and the way he explained knowledge. So he's extremely eloquent, extremely knowledgeable, extremely courageous. All of the characteristics that we talked about before that Imam Zayn al-Abidin mentioned, they are all in him to the utmost level. And so, and he is also a friend of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So even before, because Umar bin Abdul Aziz, at one point was the governor of Medina, Hajjaj convinced Walid to have him removed from that position, which he eventually will be removed. Suleiman will reinstate him. And the reason he was removed is because Hajjaj would torture people and he was a tyrant in Iraq. They would come to Medina to seek asylum, and he would give them asylum. And Hajjaj didn't like this, so he had him removed. But he is a friend, a much younger friend of Umar bin Abdul Aziz is much older than him, so he's a younger friend of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He is also amongst those who gave him advice. So even when Umar bin Abdul Aziz became the king, Imam Zayd would actually correspond with him. And because when Umar bin Abdul Aziz becomes the king, he has to leave Medina and come to Damascus because that's the capital of the kingdom. And so Imam Zayd would continue to correspond with him and pass knowledge on to him, give him advice, and at the same time, consult with him on various things. As Imam Muhammad Baqir would also correspond with him and teach him and advise him as well. So again, the 2.5 years that he is the king, you have this justice, you have this propagation of knowledge, of true knowledge, and then again after him, you go back, you revert back to what was before him in Banu Umayyah. So Imam Zayd, again, he's seen these rough times, then he saw the good time, and now he's back into the rough times again. So, as I said, Yazid II, tyrant, tyranny is now prevailing. Then Hisham eventually becomes the king. So Hisham becomes the king roughly about 105 Hijri, somewhere in there. And then he will remain the king until about 125 or so. Okay, so roughly about 20 years. Hisham, if you remember, is that same guy, this is when he was crowned prince, that Farazdak recited the poem to in honor of Imam Zayd al-Abidin. So that is Hisham. So his knowing his knowing Ahlul Bayt and his animosity towards Ahlul Bayt is nothing new. And now that he's become the king, he can go all out, as he does. So tyranny upon tyranny over, dealing with Ahlul Bayt. And so this is when Imam Zayd, begins his revolt and his movement. And he starts gathering people to join him, in this fight. Because again, he's knowledgeable, he's eloquent. He also wrote, issues of fiqh, hadith, and all of this knowledge he's very well entrenched with. To the extent that Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, he said that there was no one amongst Ahlul Bayt who was more knowledgeable, no one who was more on the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam than Imam Zayd. And so he is also the Pir and Murshid, the one to whom Imam Abu Hanifa gave his allegiance. So Imam Abu Hanifa gave his hand in the hand of Imam Zayd gave allegiance to him. And these allegiances aren't light. And this is what people don't understand these days, especially because you have people, they take bay'ah with one sheikh, and then a couple of days later they're taking bay'ah with some other sheikh, and then another sheikh. It doesn't work that way. This bay'ah literally means to sell yourself. I have sold myself to my sheikh. I've given myself to him, and whatever he commands me, however he leads me, because I know he will lead me in accordance with Allah and His Messenger. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I have the utmost trust in him. I have annihilated myself for him. This is what that bay'ah means. And these are people like Imam Abu Hanifa who understood what that meant. So he gives him allegiance. And Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, I never met anyone more knowledgeable than Imam Zayd. Even though his teacher Hamad bin Sulaiman, he's the one who Imam Abu Hanifa learned fiqh from. But his spiritual guide and leader was Imam Zayd. So he eventually gathers this army, and roughly an army of 8,000 men. And he's in Kufa. This is where he's, because Kufa was supposed to be the center of the supporters of Ahlul Bayt. And so he comes to Kufa from Medina Munawwara. He gathers these people who all pledge allegiance to him, claiming to sell themselves to him, that whatever he commands from them. And, he's going to go and fight against the army of Hisham. So Hisham sends an army of about 20,000 men. Even though the army of Hisham is significantly larger, basically about 2.5 times larger than his army. But 8,000 versus 20,000, depending on circumstances, was still a reasonable battle. Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi alayhi actually makes the announcement to his students that, look, Imam Zayd is going, so whoever can join him, join him. He himself wanted to join him, but Imam Zayd ordered him to go back and told him that, basically this process of learning and teaching needs to continue, and you need to continue this. Because Imam Zayd already knows what's going to happen, because when he's doing all of this, gathering all of this, he spoke to his nephew, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, alayhi salam, who, as I said, was about 6 years younger than him, but also very knowledgeable. When he was in the process of doing this, his older brother, Imam Muhammad Baqir, passes away before him. But he was aware of, the process that Imam Zayd had already begun. And so when he's going, Imam Ja'far Sadiq says to him, he says that, look, he says, if you are pleased with being killed and that your body be hung from the gallows, then, do what you're doing. So, if you have no hesitation in giving your life for this cause in this manner, then continue what you're doing. Because a lot of people will try to tell you that, oh, he tried to convince him not to do it. That's like, the same people that tell you that, oh, the companions told Imam Hussein al-Islam not to go to Kufa. Well, they did, but that's not what they meant. It's not like, oh, because they tried to imply that, oh, see, Imam Ja'far Sadiq is telling him that, oh, what you're doing is not right, don't do this. That's not what he's saying. Just like the companions weren't saying, oh, what you're doing is wrong, so don't do this. No, they're saying that, we're afraid of what those people will do to you, what those people who pledge allegiance to you will do to you. So the same thing happens here. So Imam Abu Hanifa says go, tells his students go. And amongst the students was one son of a mother. He was the only son of that family. And so the mother comes to Imam Abu Hanifa and says, on your announcement, my son has gone and joined the army of Imam Zayd. And I'm afraid that he will be killed. And if he is killed, then he's the only son and our lineage will be cut. And so Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi, he says to her, he says, are you not satisfied that the name of your son would be included in the martyrs of Badr? And so, which is an important statement here, we'll note this. And also the statement of Imam Ja'far Sadiq is important to note, because he says, if you're pleased with being martyred and that you be killed and your body be hung from the gallows. How does he know that? Plus Imam Abu Hanifa, who is extremely wealthy, as we know, he gave Imam Zayd 30,000 dirham. So again, 30,000 dirham, 3 dirham by a cow at that time. So that's what, 1,000 cows, right? 30,000 divided by 3 is 10,000 cows. $1,000 a pop a cow these days, roughly. So that's like what, 10 million bucks. Money our time. So the dirham were the silver coins. So he gave him 30,000 dirham. So Banu Umayyah approached Imam Abu Hanifa. And they wanted him to give a ruling against what Imam Zayd was doing. So make this, because all these governments, so-called Islamic governments, they come and they have their puppet scholars who give fatwa according to what the scholar, what the government wants. We see this, today. I mean, any country, whether it's Saudi or Kuwait or UAE or Pakistan or any other so-called Morocco, Sudan, all these so-called Muslim countries, with these so-called Islamic governments. That's what do? They have their scholars. The scholars give the fatwa according to what the government wants. So this isn't new. This is something that's been going on from the beginning. So they come to Imam Abu Hanifa and they want him to give fatwa. And they offer him position of Chief Justice. And he says, his response to them is very interesting. He says, Ana min shi'atihi, that I am from his party. I am part of his party. I am his supporter. And then he blatantly tells him, he says, because I've given him 30,000 dirham. So how am I going to give ruling against him? He is my master. So when Imam Zayd leaves Kufa, again, he has this army of 8,000 men. They get short, just slightly outside of the precincts of Kufa. And they're getting ready to go and meet this army that's coming from Hisham. And there are generals within his army that come, leaders within the army that come to him. And they say to him, look, we are willing to give our lives and our wealth for you. But we want you to curse the Shaykhain, meaning curse Abu Bakr and Umar, radiallahu anhu. And so Imam Zayd's response to them was that, how can I curse those about whom I have not heard anything but good from my forefathers? And again, this is the eloquence of what he's saying. Because if I analyze, he could have simply said, how can I curse those who I know not, who I only know good about, and put it on himself. But if he had said that, these people could have said, oh, you've left the way of your forefathers. Because who are his forefathers? Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are his forefathers, right? So he says, he doesn't put it on himself that, they're good people, I'm telling you they're good people. No. He says, how can I curse a people about whom I have not heard anything but good from my forefathers? Because if you're claiming to be following Ahlul Bayt, then follow Ahlul Bayt. And so when he says this, they say their response to him was, oh, you have left the path. You have left, the way of the believers. And his response to them was that you are Rawafid. This is the first time the word was used in that sense, Rahzi. So he says, you are the Rawafid. And Rawafid means the one who leaves. So you're the ones who have abandoned the path. And so they abandon him. And he's left with 313 men. Just as Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi had alluded to. Because in Badr, how many men? 313. So now you have this army of 313 that's going up against an army of 20,000. And so his men, who are loyal to him, who are truly believers, they approach him and they give him advice. And they say, look, we know we're dead. We're going to meet this army, we know we're dead. You take this opportunity to get out and leave. And we will cover your back while you're escaping, so that you can continue your mission later. And he looks at them and he says, look, your advice is very sincere, and your advice is very good, but I cannot follow it. So they say, well, if you acknowledge that our advice is sincere, you acknowledge that the advice is good, then why can't you follow it? He says, because there are examples in my family where we go into the battle, but there is no example of my family, of my household, leaving the battle. Ali radiallahu anhu, he didn't wear armor on his back. And when he was asked, he said, because I will never give the enemy the opportunity to see my back. So he said, this is not the way of Ahlul Bayt. to leave the battle. So we have clear examples of going into battle. There is no example of running away from the battle. He says. So the battle, of course, begins. I mean, you got, again, 313 against 20,000. He is martyred early in the battle. His son Yahya takes him and buries him at the edge of the river. You have the Euphrates there, where the water comes over. Trying to hide, makes a quick, shallow grave, buries him, and tries to remove any marks, because he knows what Banu Umayyah is going to do if they find his body. But again, this is what Imam Ja'far Sadiq had already told. Because these are things that came through narration that Ahlul Bayt were very aware of. And so, by the end of the battle, all of them are martyred. They find the grave. Banu Umayyah finds the grave. They dig him up. They behead him, send his head to Damascus, to the king Hisham. They take pleasure in seeing proof of what they have ordered. And then they hang his body. They crucify his body. And they crucified it in the gallows, and just as his nephew had mentioned. And it was interesting because they would turn it a certain way, and over time, slowly, the body would turn and face the Qibla. And then they would turn it, and then over time, the same thing would happen. And they're seeing this, but they still don't accept. Just like, when the people of Namrud see Ibrahim al-Islam falling into the fire, and then coming out of it unscathed after 40 days, they still don't believe. When the hearts are sealed, nothing can get in. And the hearts are sealed because of their disrespect to the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, after knowing who they are. And so this went on. So this was the year 122 Hijri. 125 is when Hisham dies, roughly around there. And then his nephew Walid II becomes the king. And Walid ordered that the body be taken down and burnt, and the ashes were spread, or thrown, cast out. It's interesting, again, he's hanging for 4 years. How's he hanging for 4 years? You think about that. I mean, 4 years, the body should have rotted, the bones should have all fallen apart. All those ligaments that are holding the bones, connecting the bones and stuff, all of that is gone in 4 years. Not even 4 years. Doesn't take that long. All of that should have been gone. But for 4 years, he's hanging. And they see this, but they still don't accept. And so then, again, that next king, Walid II, comes and he orders him to be taken down, burnt, body is burnt, and the ashes are spread out. So that is Imam Zayd. So now coming to his older brother, Imam Muhammad Baqir. So Imam Muhammad Baqir is also the son of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. His mother is the daughter of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Fatima bint Hassan. He is born sometime before Karbala, which also proves that Imam Zayn al-Abidin was not 9 or 10 years old at the time of Karbala. He was in his late teens, early 20s. more than likely around 22 or so, during the time of Karbala. Because there's confusion between his age and his older brother, Imam Ali Akbar's age. So, a lot of people say Ali Akbar was 22 at the time of Karbala. It was actually Imam Zayd al-Abidin, Ali Awsa, who was 22. His other brother is probably a year or two older than him, Ali Akbar. Okay. There are questions whether he was or was not in Karbala, Imam Muhammad Baqir, or whether he was left in Medina Munawwara when they left. More than likely, he was probably there with his father. Of course, he's a very young child, and eventually, they come back to Medina Munawwara. He is taught by his father, constantly in the presence of his father. After his father passes, as I said, 95 Hijri, he continues this process of teaching and learning. He, like his father, from an apparent standpoint, was not a threat to the government. He is interesting because he is also mentioned in Hadith. And for those who try to say, these hadiths are daif or anything, this hadith is in Sahih Muslim. The hadith part that is in Sahih Muslim is simply this much, is that, Jabir ibn Abdullah, radiallahu anhu, who was a very close companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's teaching in the masjid. He by this time is very old. This is well after Karbala. And while he's teaching, he hears some footsteps. And he says to his students, he says, I hear the footsteps of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming. And when he says this, then Imam Muhammad Baqir, he arrives, he sits down, and he asks him, he says, what is your name? And he says, Muhammad, which is the sunnah of Rasulullah. He didn't attach all his titles and everything else to his name. He simply said Muhammad. And then Jabir ibn Abdullah, he asked him, he says, Muhammad who? And he says, Muhammad bin Ali. And now he's certain who this is. He knew before, but he just wanted to make sure and have everybody else be sure. So Ali, of course, is the name of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. So he's Ali bin Muhammad bin Ali. So he says to him, he says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent salam to you, gave you his salam. I mean, you think about that. I mean, that's a big deal. That's not a small issue. This is the hadith portion that is in Sahih Muslim, but it's a portion of the whole hadith. So the whole hadith is this, is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is sitting in the masjid, and Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu is with him. And as they're sitting there, Imam Hussein al-Islam, who's 5 or 6 years old, comes into the masjid, and he lays his blessed head on the blessed thigh of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asks Jabir, or he says to Jabir, he says, "Oh Jabir, this son of mine," meaning Imam Hussein al-Islam, "will have a son. And on the day of judgment, a caller will call out, 'O Sayyidul Abidin, O Master of the worshippers, come forward and enter paradise.' And so that son will come forward, and he will take with him thousands and enter paradise." So this is where we get Zayn al-Abidin, because Zayn al-Abidin means the peak or the epiphany of the worshippers. So Sayyid al-Abidin, Zayn al-Abidin. Okay. And then he continues, he says, "And that son will have a son, whose name will be upon my own, meaning Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. He says that son will have a son whose name will be upon my own, and O Jabir, you will meet him. You know, for those who claim that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't know, how did he know Jabir or was going to be alive then? He says that son, and O Jabir, you will meet him, and when you meet him, give him my salam. So this is what Imam Jabir ibn Abdullah radhiyallahu anhu is doing. He is conferring that trust, you know, because when someone, you know, says, "Oh, give him my salam," that is a trust. So that trust that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave him, he is fulfilling that trust. And he says to him, he says, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent his salam to you. And then the rest of this also, which is not mentioned in Sahih Muslim, is that he calls him forward and he hugs him and he smells his neck and he says, I smell the fragrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam coming from you. Because that was a very distinct fragrance, that when the companions wanted to know where he was, they simply followed their noses. And this beautiful fragrance of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. So this is that Muhammad Baqir. And this is the one again who opens the doors, you know, cracks open the depths of knowledge. So amongst his students are Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Sufyan Thawri, all these great scholars and fiqh and muhaddis and Imam Malik. So all of these great scholars are his students, and they bow to his knowledge. They humble themselves before his knowledge. So same thing with him. So, you know, of course, Walid also, you know, tried to cause issues for Imam Muhammad Baqir, and then of course he's not there very long. Once Imam Muhammad, you know, Imam Zayd al-Abidin passes, said 95, Yazid dies 96, so just a year there roughly, and then you have 2.5 years of Sulaiman, and then Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So 2.5 years roughly about Umar bin Abdul Aziz. So Umar bin Abdul Aziz, that time again, you have a time where Islam flourishes, and where the people flourish. And Imam Muhammad Baqir is amongst the advisors to Umar bin Abdul Aziz, and had several meetings, personal meetings with him as well, and you know, also talking about giving people rights, their rights, and fulfilling the trust of Allah. So then from there, after that, of course, you have, as I mentioned before, Yazid II, and then Hisham. So roughly about 115 Hijri is when Hisham will have Imam Muhammad Baqir poisoned. So he also will pass through poison. But you know, the thing is, they do this thinking that they're going to, you know, kind of attain some level of security for themselves when they're literally selling their hereafter. Hisham is interesting in that he tried to pose himself as a religious leader, a religious ruler. So superficially, you know, he would, you know, he wasn't like many of his other brothers and cousins, you know, a drunk. But, you know, he did everything else as far as, you know, having, you know, fighting against Banu Umayyah just to keep his power. So, you know, all these leaders of today, again, these are reflections of what came before. So you see all these leaders. Some of them are openly against Islam, and then you have others who try to pose themselves as being religious-minded and trying to safeguard the tenets and the principles of Islam, and yet they go totally against all of that. But also, again, as we mentioned before, Imam Muhammad Baqir, not openly a threat to the government, but the government knows who's a threat to them. And because of his teachings, that's why Hisham said, we got to get rid of him. Because he's going to enlighten the people. The people are becoming more enlightened through him. They will realize what we're doing. And then we won't be able to do what we do. Same reason Quraysh was against Rasulullah, same reason, that all of these leaders, and the same reason that they don't want us as Muslims to even know who Ahlul Bayt are. Because it takes away from their control over us. Because that gives us true Iman, and then that allows us to see things through the nur of Allah. So things become very apparent and very clear. Any questions so far?
How old was Imam Zayd?
Imam Zayd was in his 40s. So he's I think 42 or 43. He wasn't that old. So, he was about 45. So roughly about 45. As I mentioned, he and Imam Abu Hanifa are about the same age. Imam Ja'far Sadiq, who will later be the teacher, also one of the teachers of Imam Abu Hanifa, is actually about roughly about 6 years, 4 to 6 years younger than Imam Abu Hanifa. And it's funny because Ibn Taymiyyah claims, he disputes the fact that Imam Ja'far Sadiq was amongst the teachers of Imam Abu Hanifa, and that Imam Abu Hanifa was his student. And his reasoning for or his proof rather, his proof that that Imam Ja'far Sadiq was not the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa is that they were contemporaries. They were at the same time. What does that mean? Rasulullah ﷺ was younger than many of his companions, and he looked younger than most of his companions. Of course, that's an example, but you look throughout history where you have students and disciples that are older than their sheikhs and stuff. That's a common thing. So just because he was a contemporary, they were contemporaries, so it has absolutely no meaning. But because he said it, so many people are going, see, this is right. Because he wants to discredit the knowledge and the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa. So in order to do that, he has to try to show, because he himself praised Imam Ja'far Sadiq, of course that had his own reasoning, or the knowledge of Imam Ja'far Sadiq, but he wants to discredit Imam Abu Hanifa, so that's how he tries to do that. Okay. Anything else?
With Imam Zayd, while he was going to fight against Imam Hisham's 20,000 army, there were 8,000 with Imam Zayd, right?
Yeah, so the question is, when Imam Zayd alayhi is setting out with his army against Hisham, La'natullah. So Imam Zayd, his initial army is roughly about 8,000 men. They know that they're going to come against an army that's roughly about 20,000. So this was pre-known. So this was an excuse for those 7,000 whatever that abandoned him. So, oh, do this. They knew he wasn't going to do this. You're giving allegiance to a man, even though Imam Zayd's position and clear position and open position was that he considered Ali radiallahu anhu afzal, or fazilat, or more virtuous than Shaykhain, Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhu. I mean, he said this clearly in various khutbahs, that he considered Ali radiallahu anhu afzal over Shaykhain, but at the same time he loved and honored Shaykhain. He loved and honored Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhu. He respected them and their positions, and he did not deny the khilafah of Abu Bakr or Umar. So that's why there are a group of Shias today known as the Zaydis. Most of the Shia in Yemen that are there, those are Zaydi Shias. So if you see those who are truly Zaydi Shias, they will not curse Abu Bakr or Umar. Their stance is simply, Ali should have been the Khalifa, but whatever happened, and we don't curse anybody. So their stance is very different than the Rahzis and some of the other groups. So by the end, of course, when they abandoned him, he's left with 313 men, which is the same that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had in Badr. It's interesting also if you read the Quran, when Bani in Surah Baqarah, Bani Israel, when they ask for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to appoint them a king that will lead them into battle, they ask the Prophet to ask Allah to appoint a king for them, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appoints Talut as their king, and then they, he's poor and he's this and that, and so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the proof of his king, him being the king, is that the Ta'but al-Sakina, the Ark of the Covenant, will come to him, and it came to him, right? So when he sets out against Jalut, against Goliath, the army of Goliath, he sets out with thousands of Bani Israel. And he tells them that this water stream is coming, and a test for you is that you cannot drink from that water. And of course they get to that stream, and all of them drank from that water, except for 313. So he's also left with 313. So when he goes into battle against Jalut, who's got this massive army, he has 313 men with him. But amongst those men was Dawood a.s., who was a young man at that time, and he's amongst those men. And he, of course, kills Jalut, or Goliath. So 313 there, 313 in Badr, 313 here with Imam Zayd. And we know that there were Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down roughly about 124,000 prophets, plus or minus 124,000 prophets, Nabi. But amongst those 124,000 Nabi, there are 313 of Rasul. So again, that number is significant, there as well. Okay. Anything else? So I'll end here today. We won't have class next Sunday because we will have the program Saturday night or after evening. So from Asr to Maghrib, inshallah, in honor of Imam Hussein al-Islam and the martyrs of Karbala. So we'll do that, and so everybody is invited. Again, tell your friends and see if you can get people to come. These are things that everybody has an excuse for. Oh, I can't go because I got this or I got that. It just shows where our priorities are. There are some people that legitimately won't be here, so they can't come, but that's a different issue. But you have so many people who, oh, I just forgot. What can you do? So we'll end a little bit early today, inshallah. No more questions? Good. These are people important to know and to remember. And to remember when times are hard for us, Because in their remembrance, we remember Allah, but in their remembrance is also a cure for our hearts and our diseases, whether they're diseases of the mind or the body. As we know, and when we talk about this, when we talk about Imam Ali Rida, that narration that he narrates from his father, 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 from Ali Rida, from Rasulullah, from Allah. And Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, rahmatullah alayhi, he says that within this chain is the cure for even the insane. So that's why it's important to remember them, so that we can apply what they have taught us and move forward. So, وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us His true love and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all those whom they love. And may He protect our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Palestine and Kashmir and Sudan and wherever the people are being oppressed and over their oppressors. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.